This is the CopThink podcast where we answer the question, why do the police do what they do? And I'm the host, Brian Casey. My guest is Don Chouinard. I say that name with confidence. I bet I said it right.
You did.
Yeah. And this is what I thought of it could be our topic, and this is kind of what I recruited you for, if that's okay if I say it that way. Is
Browbeat?
Oh, I like that.
No, did I say that out loud?
You did, actually. Is that I really wanted to talk to what we may refer to as a senior patrol officer.
Okay.
You qualify for that, right?
I guess. That's what they tell me.
Yeah, they tell you that. Speaking of that, I'm curious, what year did you start at St. Paul?
I started in St. Paul in 1995.
95. Were you a cop before or anywhere?
I was. I worked in Eden Prairie for 4 years before that. And 4 years before that, I worked out in McLeod County, a little town called Winstead.
Yeah.
And then I actually started out up in northern Minnesota, up in Wadena County. Worked up there in a little town called Monaga. That's where I got licensed after college.
And were you, did you grow up there?
Yeah, I grew up in Sebeka, which is about 9 miles away.
So is that Iron Range or no?
Nope, it's central Minnesota. It's about an hour north of Brainerd.
Oh.
North and west.
So what year did you start your cop career?
1985.
Nice. So I know you're the old guy at the police department, I guess, but I started my ambulance career in 1985.
Okay.
So we started the same time doing public safety work. Matter of fact, I bet we crossed paths while you were in Eden Prairie because I was a Hennepin medic.
Yeah, probably. I was there from 91 to 95.
Yeah, so was I. So when you started, I forgot the name of the town up there. How many cops were up there?
Monaga. There was 3. Actually, the chief was a retired St. Paul officer. His name was Wally Alf. He had worked in St. Paul his whole career, retired, and went up there to be the chief of police.
Well, back in 1985, when you started police work and when I started ambulance work, do you remember there were guys leaving after 30-year careers? And these were Vietnam vets. And would you remember some of the guys that were still around, maybe even at St. Paul when you made it down here, or at your other jobs that were had been in the career a long time?
Well, again, Wally Alf was my first chief. He actually hired me. I got my license activated through them. Worked as they had a 3-man department, and I filled in there in the summer. Also worked for the sheriff's department, working in the parks in the summer because they had a lot of tourists up there in the summer. So a lot of those guys, like I said, Wally did his whole career here in St. Paul, and then went up there. Yeah, a lot of the guys from the sheriff's department, they're all gone now. In fact, a lot of them have passed away. So,
Sure. Did you love it, being a brand new cop up there?
Yeah, I often get asked how much I made starting out my first police job.
They paid you.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
$3.75 an hour. So, and we had a gun, a pair of handcuffs, a flashlight, and that was it. No portable radios. There wasn't anything like that. There was a 10 code for every restaurant or gas station in the county.
Yeah.
And the dispatcher had a list of all of those with a phone number. So if you checked out somewhere, either at a gas station or a restaurant to eat, you checked out with a 10 code, and then you might be sitting there and the phone would ring, and the waitress would come over and say, "Hey, it's the dispatcher. They got a call for you." And then you go get on the phone, and they'd say, "Hey, you got an accident out on the highway." And
did you probably, like a lot of those rural Minnesota cops, you had dinner with either a sheriff deputy or a state trooper or maybe a cop from another city or town or something?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was usually the one deputy that might be on or the one trooper that was on in that area.
Yeah.
They would float around and have dinner with the small town guys.
So I've only done police work in St. Paul, but I think the cops that get that experience, I think that's got to be super valuable. The small town cop stuff.
It's weird when I talk to people, other officers now, about, we didn't have a repeated radio system then. So if you stopped somebody in town in Monaga, you couldn't get out on the radio to the dispatcher to call in their name. So we would have to drive them to the south end of town up on the hill. And that really freaked people out, especially at night.
You thought they were going to murder them?
Yeah, where are you taking me? I'm like, I can't get on the radio. We got to go to the top of the hill. And so you'd put them in the back and drive up to the top of the hill and run their name and everything because you couldn't get out in town. It's just the way it was. I mean, and then there was nobody else around. We worked a later shift in the small town, so the deputies were off the road at midnight, and the troopers were, maybe off at 1 or 2. So
Yeah.
there might be a call 20 miles out in the country, and the dispatcher would say, "Hey, can you go check that before I wake a deputy up?"
Yeah. And you're like,
So-
sure, something to do.
A little different, yeah. It was a little different style of policing.
My brother started out same time you did, and back then I think cop jobs were hard to come by in the metro area or whatever. And he was in Benson, Minnesota for years. And he said at night it was like being a fire watcher. I mean, just look, it was so quiet.
Right.
Amazingly quiet. And then driving long distances to car wrecks.
Yeah.
And then being by yourself for long periods of time before. I mean, I bet you learned some, even the officer safety skills that.
Well, you learn how to talk to people because you're the only one there. I mean, if the deputy was already off the road and they were asking you to take a domestic, 20 miles out of town, and they would have to call somebody out if it got bad, you just learned how to talk to people. And I think we've lost some of that over the years, especially in the bigger cities where you maybe have to talk for a minute or two and you got plenty of help there. You didn't have that then. It might be an hour, 45 minutes into an hour before somebody got there to help you.
Well, even not only that, but wanting to be really judicious about making a cop come to help you.
Right.
We're here, we just keep coming until we get more cops and you know what to do with sometimes.
Right.
That's cool. So that's a good experience that you had. I guess it's good, right?
Right,
And then
yeah,
you did
and-
suburban policing for a while, and then you ended up at St. Paul.
Yep. Yeah. It was a different focus there too. It wasn't a focus on arresting people on the small towns. It was more a focus of helping them work through their problems and solving the problem. Because it wasn't like you had 10 calls pending. You could spend an hour talking to somebody and.
Well, and also too, I imagine you knew you were going to deal with them again.
Right.
It was guaranteed you would deal with them again. So you
That's
had this
correct.
interest in kind of like knowing that relationship, what you did or didn't do is going to affect the next deal. I mean, it happens with us here still, but it's not the
Right.
same.
And I grew up there, so I knew most of the people.
Oh, you went to high
because
school and
Went to
everything?
high school there,
Oh.
grew up there, so yeah. So a lot of times, I knew the people because I'd grown up there, or
And-
maybe dealing with their parents, the kids that I went to school with.
Sure.
So
And them reminding of you of all the shenanigans you did.
right. I get reminded of that plenty.
Did you have any siblings or any relatives that were cops?
My dad was.
Oh.
He did 30 years in the military, in the Army, and then when he got out, he was a lieutenant in Surfside Beach, Texas, the police department there. And he actually worked there until he was still working when he passed away of a heart attack.
Oh, goodness.
So, other than that, no other relatives that were in law enforcement.
Okay. So that explains a little bit what you're doing before St. Paul. And you said you got there in 95, or I can't remember.
95 in St. Paul,
95,
yes.
okay.
November 95.
Now, one thing I know about you is that you've been on the SWAT team longer than all but one cop, right?
I believe so, yes. That's the rumor.
Well, we could just say what we want, and then
Okay. Yes, Bill Baudette
Yeah.
has me beat.
yeah.
And he's younger than me, so I won't beat him in time.
Okay.
So he's
How long have you been on the SWAT team?
21 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, I've been lucky.
Yeah.
So it's been a good run.
Yeah.
Good run.
SWAT years really add up too, because you watch how the job changes around that, how they utilize them may be different, how you approach. I mean, I noticed that just even searching houses with guys on SWAT team guys, like, wow, you're damn good at this.
We practice
Yeah.
a little more than everybody else.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So you liked the SWAT stuff, you still do.
Yeah, it keeps me feeling young.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing where I'm sure every call out, every exposure, every experience adds to this kind of library of knowledge for that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the philosophy years ago was if you got 5 to 7 years on the team, they rotated you out so somebody else could have a chance. And I think as that progressed, they realized that we needed people that had that much time or more experience because, we're not that big of a city where there's so much to do that it's nice to have guys that have had more of a variety of calls that can help work through it.
So what's your job? How do you describe your job now?
Just a patrol officer in the Eastern District, day shift.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, standard, the same as the other guys out taking calls.
Yeah, but East, why you at East?
I like it. I like the activity there. It's busy. I've worked every district. When I first came on, I worked West. Then I tried to bid East to work with my old partner from Eden Prairie who was working East, but I got bumped because of seniority to Central. So I did a year in Central, and then I went to East after that. Did a short stint in the academy as liaison. Went to the motor unit after that for about 6 years, and then back to East, and that's where I've been ever since.
So even that short stint in the academy, that was what, only months long, right?
Right. Yeah, about a year by the time because I got in there a little bit before to get things ready, then was there for the academy, and then after the academy, winding down and stuff. So I think it was 9 months, maybe almost a year.
And then the motors unit is traffic work, or is
that? Yeah, that was all traffic.
How long did you do that for?
I think 6 years.
Oh, okay. But you've only been in uniform. You've never got a so-called indoor job besides
No, I like being out on the street.
Yeah.
So.
And now I think you are, we were joking about this, I don't know if you use this term, but you're kind of in that phase where you could say, you can go ahead and put that one back in pending. I'm EOT, which is a joke.
Right. But
what does that mean to the listener?
That means as of tomorrow, I'll have 33 years in para, and I was 55 yesterday. So I'm pretty much there where I could go at any minute.
Yeah.
When I decide enough is enough, I'll go.
What kind of mindset does that put you in?
It's different. It's I don't know how to explain it. It's a new, I've done the same thing for 33 years. The thought of getting up and not doing that anymore. What am I going to do? I have ideas that what I would like to do, maybe try some other things, but I haven't done those things. I've just done this same thing for 33 years. Mm-hmm. So,
what would you have done, do you think, if you didn't be a cop?
Well, I wanted to be a game warden, and that's what I went to school for. That's my degree's at natural resources.
Yeah.
But back in the mid 80s, affirmative action was huge, and I scored in the top 10, 15, 3 or 4 times I took that test and didn't get a shot. So I needed a job. I had a degree in law enforcement. Took the first one I could get.
Yeah. What did you, and being an urban cop on the east side is very different than game warden work.
Right.
I think of the guys that do the game warden, that looks, I wouldn't be a good fit for me. But man, I can see why they love that work.
Yeah, and especially for somebody that grew up in northern Minnesota, hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, whatever. We didn't really have ATVs back when I was a kid, but just being outdoors, that was a perfect fit for me, or at least I thought at the time. That's why I wanted to do that.
Well, how do you think you're going to do when you retire? I'm not pushing you out the door. Matter of fact, it's irritating, isn't it, when people...
Oh, I get asked that question every day.
How
long you got left? How long you got left?
Right.
What are you still doing here?
Yeah. Do you have a good joke answer for them?
When I pretty much say I'm one call away.
Yeah. Don't make me mad.
Yeah, one call going, no, I don't think I'm going to take that one. I'll be OT. So,
how do you think you're going to do in retirement?
I think I'll do fine. I just, I have 3 boys that keep me, busy when they're home, and I've got lots of hobbies, and I don't see any issue with. Like I said, everybody tells me it's an adjustment, so I'll figure it out.
Yeah, a lot of people do great.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to implant the idea one way or the other.
Right.
But it is a huge adjustment,
Yeah, I know it's coming. I've been, thinking about it for a while, and with the way things are going now in this climate, and it's a different style of policing than. My boys talk about that. 2 of them are in the military, and they talk about becoming cops. And they said, the stories you heard 20 years ago is not this job anymore. It's a different style of policing. And
tell me more about that.
Well, it's just what you see every day. I mean, right now, when I first started, just as an example, there was a lot more trust, a lot more, respect came with the position. When you went to court, there was no body cameras or in-car cameras, and your testimony was based on your training and experience, and you were believed. And now if it's not on camera, it didn't happen. They don't even want to charge it if there's no footage of your arrest or something like that. So that's a lot different. Many times I've called the county attorney or city attorney and said, why don't you charge it and let's go to trial and put me on the stand, and because that's what I'm used to. Let me testify and let's see who they believe, and
Yeah.
they just don't do that anymore. That's not the way it works.
Wow. That's the loss, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And some of it's our fault.
How's that?
Well, cops are famous for they ruin things. We're really good at wrecking things for ourselves.
Yeah.
So, and not all the time. I'm not saying but we do. And I think over the years that's maybe caught up with us a little bit. So
Like failure to police ourselves?
yes.
Yeah. Some of the best leadership I've ever experienced as a cop is when another cop will bitch out the cops.
Right.
I remember one time, I can think of a couple times, on the midnights, a cop coming in and saying, just so angry that he had been out on a stop and no one stopped by. Like, where were you guys? Why didn't you stop by? Why didn't you check on me? Other ones is, I remember another cop berating a bunch of cops for what he said was a cheap ticket. It was a bad ticket. He wrote a dumb ticket. And even in ambulance work, the senior guys used to do that. I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Right. We're all human beings. There's always something that, there's something out there that'll push your buttons or, and I've had it happen to me where guys have had to check me or say, hey, I got this, and I've done it to people because that's what you're supposed to do is take care of each other. And you can see it sometimes, I didn't see it when it was happening to me until somebody would say, hey, I got this. Let me talk to him. Then later, like, you were getting a little fired up there. And I'm like, yeah, that was pushing my buttons.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with other officers and step in and say, hey, that, we can do that better.
Yeah. Cop, we talked about that last podcast about cops doing that, knowing you've got your button pushed and it's not going to go good for you, and then they nudge you out of the way, and usually cops are grateful for it after the fact. But
right, I had it happen to me a couple weeks ago. People are treating us. Some people are treating us differently on the street. We still get thanked far more than we get yelled at out here, and. The guy was pushing my buttons, and I had to call the boss to the scene. You better come out here sooner than later, because I'm ready to lose my mind on this guy. Yeah. And so it happens. I'm just older now and realize when that's probably going to do something that I shouldn't do. And
sure, something you regret.
Yeah, I'm going to regret later.
I was talking to a copper today, and he was just talking about the beating we're taking, but he said, I ended up having to work the state fair last time and worked the front gate. And you had all these haters come by, not all these haters, but just a constant flow of people. And maybe even more now thinking, they're so thankful because they know what a beating some cops are taking now. Yeah. And some people actually have a little fear in their eyes too.
Yeah. If you watch the news, you think everybody hates the police. And that's not the case. I mean, I think the difference is you have very vocal groups that show up and are loud and make their case against the police, but you have 3 times as many people that support us that they don't gather like that. And I tell people that I was working an off-duty job a couple of weeks ago, and I probably had 100 people during the day of all, white, black, Latino come up to me and say, thank you. We want you guys here. We appreciate you here, and we're really sorry for what you're going through. And I said, I really appreciate that. I hear that a lot. But it would be nice if 10,000 of you would show up at the Capitol and say we support the police, because there's 2,000 people there last week that showed up that didn't support the police, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so to speak.
I think you make a good point, because I do think we've gotten to the point where people should pick sides.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't. No, I do see people should pick sides, and it's not enough to say, well, I support the police. You're going to have to demonstrate it, because we're taking a royal beating here, and they're changing. In a lot of ways, policing is, I think, being dismantled by idiots without a real plan for what they want to replace it with.
Right.
They just want to tear it down, which is really doesn't take much to deconstruct something.
No.
Try build something as complex as a police department and maintain it.
Right. And I think that's like I said, it's always been enough for them just to say thank you. I mean, you go to any team house and find tons of notes there and food there and different things that people drop off. It just happened today at East Team. Lady walked in the parking lot with, I don't know, 6 or 8 cases of Arnold Palmer, and her kids all wrote letters, and they just, and she wrote a letter saying, we fear for you guys and we support you. It's like, well, that's really nice, and it is, but you need to stand up at the Capitol and you need to say, no, we support the police, and even the people in the inner city that are most affected by crime, and that they say thank you a lot and they want us there,
right.
But their voices aren't really heard.
Yeah.
And a small group isn't going to do it. We need a big group to show up that the news can't ignore.
I think they do. I think they need to know what's at risk here. Even our democracy is a lot more fragile than a lot of people realize, and it wasn't easily won in the first place.
Nope.
And I think it's more fragile. That's interesting.
So that's just my feeling on it.
Sure.
I think that there's a small group of people that in every city that make the most noise, and we're not listening to the large group of people that support us. We're listening to the small group because they're making all the noise. Uh-huh. So I think it's time that the other group steps up and shows some support. I think that would be huge.
Do you have any buddies over in Minneapolis?
I do, yes.
How are those poor bastards doing?
They're pretty much firemen right now.
Yeah.
And none of them that I've talked to support that officer and his issue. I mean, but they've all had to deal with the outcome of that. Yeah. And it's a different world over there for them.
Wow.
And I think a lot of them would say the same thing I said earlier. We're our own worst enemy. We sometimes we get in the way of ourselves because we're so used to doing. Cops don't like change. It's the way we've been taught. This is the way we're going to do it. And sometimes I think you got to change with the times.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that likes change particularly.
Yeah.
So do you think policing is a thing that needs to change?
Well, you're going to get me in trouble on this one. Well, one of my favorite lines is stop trying to fix the police and fix the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Because you've sent us to every single implicit bias class, every class, to make me aware of what my biases are or aren't, and how to be a better communicator. And we're doing all of that, and things aren't changing. I like to tell people, I've been a cop a long time. I've been through a lot of chiefs, a lot of commanders, a lot of all good people, all good intentions, but they all have a different idea on what program's going to make that district better or make us more community-oriented. And nothing's really changed in 33 years. There's still good guys and there's still bad guys. And, I didn't really see any of those programs that were huge impacts on police-community relations.
Mm-hmm.
Just haven't. That's my own personal opinion. Some would disagree with that, I'm sure, but...
Well, I like that phrase. I've heard it before. Stop trying to fix the police. We've been through police reforms again before.
Right.
And yes, all industries need to be improved and make progress. But, man, I'm not so sure we're the primary problem.
No.
And if anyone needs to be re-educated, maybe it's the public, and they need to have some more curiosity to be able about what we do rather than just automatically condemning it out of confusion or misunderstanding.
Well, they always want us to be held accountable, which we should be, but where's the accountability on the other side?
Absolutely.
A lot of people would still be around had they just complied and not escalated it.
In fact, we're in the so-called accountability business in the sense that we are parental in society, and we're like, you can't do that. And, I think what happens is sometimes police break rules themselves so that we look hypocritical and et cetera and all that. But
we're not perfect. No human being is perfect. We're all imperfect. And so there's guys that make mistakes. And some people can learn from that. I've made plenty, and I've been fortunate that it hasn't cost me my career.
Right.
None of them were that bad.
That you admit to, yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah, statute of limitations and up on a couple, but no, I we all make mistakes, and if you learn from them and don't do it again, then you can do that, then you're fine. But
see, so I think that's part of it is that why can't we talk in terms of mistakes? Why do we always talk in terms of evil motivations for what happens wrong? I mean, they call medical mistakes,
right,
but it's always framed up. Rarely are police. I don't hear this language around police work about making mistakes. And here I just had a conversation with someone today too. Is sometimes, we'll support you if you do the right thing. Well, we know that.
Right.
But what about if we do the wrong thing because it was the best of a bunch of wrong options?
right,
That's the thing that I really find not helpful. Of course, yeah, you'll support us if we do the right thing. But what if some of this, it's a mess out there,
right.
and some of the options aren't very good.
And we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We're human beings, and you can't have a policy or a mentality that you have to be perfect every time.
Well,
because you can't be.
And we make remarkably few mistakes. It's actually pretty dang remarkable.
I think that's why they make the news so much, because they don't have. I mean, look, Chicago rarely makes the news anymore with all their murder rate, because it happens so much. But if it happened once a year where 30 people were killed over a weekend, then it would be huge news. But it barely is a blip in the news anymore. Because it's common.
Right. So anyway, what's the so-called Book of Chouinard?
Well, Sergeant Mike Wills is the author of that, or he maybe not the author.
He's the
publisher.
Yeah.
Publisher, yes, he's the publisher
editor,
of that book. He came up with that when he was a patrol boss on East Days, and I think there's 2 volumes now, 3-wing volumes here at the East.
These are things that actually exist.
Oh yeah, they're there. They're 3-wing binders. They're on the counter he's got it back in the sergeant's office. It's the Book of Chouinard, Volume 1, I think, is How to Make the Job Work for You, and there's a Volume 2. I can't remember what the title or what that one is. There's 2 volumes. Yes, there's.
So the first one is the Book of Chouinard. The subtitle is How to Make the Job Work for You.
That's correct.
What does that mean?
I guess I always come up with different anecdotes that over the years, and it's just kind of stuck that people think I'm always, I'm scared. Oh, he's at SWAT training today. He's not on the street, and then somebody said, well, I talked to a SWAT boss. There was no SWAT training, So, and I just have let that kind of expand over the years because it was always funny. So people think that, oh, I'm at the range today. Wait, there's no range. There's no shoot going on, or something like that, doing something other than working on the street. So that's where that all came from. Because he was a patrol boss, and I'd be like, hey, can I work the range this day, this day, this day, and this day? He's like, good Lord, when are you going to work the street?
Yeah.
And you always got some scam. Then you got SWAT. Then you got, DT. Or then you got... So that's kind of how that all came about.
Sure. What else is there in there? Because I think it's kind of an intriguing idea that how do you make the job work for you? Meaning, how do you put in 33 years at a busy police department, and then you work today, right? You work.
I did.
Patrol shift today.
Yes.
You hump calls. I mean,
Yes.
maybe a lot of guys defer to you like we do at our agency. They cancel you, or I'm not sure what.
I do.
Like
I get canceled quite often. Yes.
And what I mean by that for others would be that younger officers will say, cancel him. I'll be primary on that. You still maybe show up or assist or whatever.
Oh yeah, I do, but a lot of officers will routinely cancel me on calls because they're junior and they don't have. I mean, there's days it's hard to take a call sometimes because people are like, nah, cancel him, I'll take it.
Yeah,
or,
right.
Which I appreciate, but I still try to take my share of calls.
Sure you do. But you also, when you show up though, even when I was a patrol boss, I really loved having really senior officers out there because I knew that they would help manage the cops out there. I mean, it's a powerful position.
I find that happening a lot more. What I've noticed a lot more is people kind of gravitate towards me when I show up. Probably because of the gray hair or something. They're like, "You're the OG." I'm like, "What do you mean OG? You're the old guy." I'm like, "Thanks a lot," because a lot of these guys have worked these neighborhoods so long.
Isn't that original gangster?
Yeah, it might be. They say old guy, but
Okay.
so they're just, but they know I've been around for a long time, and I always I was taught, when I first started this job, treat people the way you would want to be treated if you dealt with the police, and you'll have a lot less problems, and learning to talk to people and things, and so over the years, I haven't lived by that every minute of my career,
Sure.
but I try to live that mantra. So
I'm glad you said it that way, because treat people like you want to be treated. I don't know. I don't have that saintliness about me. I mean, you try, you see value in it. Some people are real knuckleheads and need to be put in their place, maybe.
right,
in
and
ways.
but they start there. I don't start
What do you
up
mean?
high. When I go to a call or on a traffic stop, I start very professional and very polite, and the only way that's going to change is how they react to me.
Yeah,
So
of course, that makes a lot of sense.
and that's worked well for me. It maybe doesn't work for everybody, but it has worked well for me over the years. I don't.
Well, let me ask you. I do a little miniature commercial here.
Okay.
But before I do the commercial, I want you to just think about this. When was you don't have to answer it right away, but when was the last time you said, "Oh my God, I thought I saw everything"? In the last year or so, have you had a call or experience where you thought, "Wow, that's a new one"? So, this is a commercial, and that is. Let's see. If you enjoyed this podcast, you might be interested in my book. It's called Good Cop, A Get Healthy, Stay Healthy Guide for Law Enforcement. And I cover a lot of topics, some of which we talked about today. The book is in print or on audiobook, and you can purchase it at Amazon. And you can also find out more information about the podcast, the book, and other things I do at goodcop.com. So anyway, did you think of anything?
Yeah. I would have to say the riots we just recently had, probably the worst thing I've ever seen in my career. I've never, I mean, I see them on TV, but they haven't actually happened in the city where I work. I've never seen anything like it. The RNC wasn't anything like that. The stuff at the governor's mansion a few years back was nothing like what I saw that day on University Avenue. I was just amazed that was happening in St. Paul. I've always felt like we had a really good relationship with people in this town, other than the knuckleheads that you're never going to have a good relationship with no matter what. But a majority of the people, we just had, we just didn't see those kind of problems. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, does heartbreaking fit
Oh, absolutely.
to watch?
Standing on the street, watching them inside the business, lighting fires,
Yeah.
and not being able to go in and get them, because that's what you're taught to do: is go arrest the bad guy.
It was I was there too. I mean, I haven't do police work as long as you, but I've been either doing this or ambulance work. I'd never experienced anything like it. It actually changed my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a change that happened to me, watching people actively loot, setting fires. The vile things they said to us.
Oh.
The rocks and bottles, watching cops get knocked down, dragged off the line.
Yeah.
And then even the more mild things like standing on the line and have kids younger than my kids blowing cigarette smoke under my shield.
Yeah.
And
I often worry about that in talking to younger officers, to have to listen to that vile and have that happen to you day in and day out, because it happens now. They're very emboldened.
yes.
There's not everybody, that small group that always wants to be the problem. And you, as a human being, I think you can only take so much of that. And, somebody's going to snap. And I hope it doesn't happen, but I just don't know how day in and day out you can take that being thrown at you without you just saying, I don't know if, enough is enough.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it's possible, this is an interesting thought, that it is more impactful for a guy like you or me than it is the young guys. The reason I say that is over the years I've had cops say to me, "Oh, Brian, you better check on those young cops, that homicide was terrible," or this or that. And maybe a senior officer will ask me to do that. I'll go talk to the young cops, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that was kind of wild. It was actually kind of interesting," or "I'd never seen that before," or "Oh yeah," they don't really kind of have a shelf to put it on. It's just a novel experience. And then it occurs to me it's the older cop that asked me to check on him that's the most bothered, because he's like, I don't want to see any more bad, ugly things. I'm
Right.
so tired of
Got
the
enough things.
incivility, that kind of stuff. And also, too, it's interesting for you to probably have, in, let's just say, the last year of your long career, the most impactful thing within the last year. And simultaneously, we had cops just out in FTO and just out of FTO. So at the very first of their career.
Right. Yeah, we have some people just getting done now, and I was talking to some last week, and like, man, you have 30 more years of this on. I couldn't do it.
But it reminds me of I don't know if this is an analogy, I don't have any grandkids, but grandparents aren't really equipped to raise the grandkids as well as the parent are, meaning they're different generations. So maybe this different generation will go like, yeah, we get it. We're technology, we don't expect our word to be trusted in court, that type of stuff. They
Right.
start out at a different spot.
Yeah, that's true. They're trained differently. Maybe it's hard when you've done it the same way for so many years, and
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. We never had people talk to us the way they do now, and it's a small group of people that do that, but it wears on you when you deal with it every day. Every call you go on, you try to talk to somebody, and they're over there.
Right.
Yep, and it's like,
Well, like you said, emboldened, and even being emboldened to offer resistance.
right.
That's huge dynamic change. However, I've been impacted by this thing, and also in my role, observing how cops are impacted. But I stopped at Central Roll Call. They had a 2 p.m. roll call today, and I sat in the back and just like I do, sitting in a roll call, just see and be seen. And I sat there thinking, these cops are so damn admirable, laughing, joking, teasing each other, patrol bosses giving them advice and making fun of them, and all that kind of camaraderie. Really bright people, right? Bright men and women going out there to work, and pretty masterful how some cops are quickly adjusting to this way of approaching people.
Right.
So I don't know. I actually don't know the impact of this big transition, but it feels very different.
Yeah, I think definitely times have changed. We're turning a corner. Which way it's going to go, I don't know. I struggle with the philosophy that when administrators get up and say it's just brick and mortar, we should leave it. Well, that brick and mortar is something that somebody maybe spent their whole life savings and half their life building up so that they could provide for their family, and now it's destroyed. And it's more than just brick and mortar to them. That's their life.
Yeah, you're talking about the looting and
the looting and the burning. It's like, and the attitude of, well, it's just a building, so don't stop them. People don't worry about arresting. We're not making any arrests or whatever the case may be. We weren't staffed well enough to do that initially.
That's so interesting that you say that, because the brick and mortar thing, there are two ways of thinking about it too. Is that it's also disorder,
Right.
and disorder matters, and also the brick and mortar is somebody's labor,
Right.
and has meaning to them. And I was even thinking about them burning the 3rd precinct. Not only is that an unbelievable symbolic loss, but I was thinking there's got to be cops that had pictures of their kids on their lockers that are burned, maybe the sap gloves that their
Right.
uncle gave them that was on the job before they were, and trophies and paperwork and funny jokes and all the symbols, and to have lost that.
Well, I've talked to officers from over there, and they did. Family pictures were defaced, where things were written on, and the vile things written about their wife and kids, and yeah. So all that, it's more than just a building.
And if you know cops like I know cops, which I know you know cops like I know cops, these are good men and women in all our imperfections, trying to do this sometimes increasingly seems like impossible task.
Right. I when you say knowing cops, I've for as long as I've been in the several different departments I've worked at, I cannot think of one cop that I have worked with or known that got into this job just to be mean to people, or just to that's just not why people get into this job. And I think sometimes it happens, and there are guys out there like that. I just personally have never met one that was just a bad cop. They're out there, and I get that, but I don't think anybody ever gets into this job with that intention.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I agree. I think, and even if that did happen, it's just the humanity of it and all that. I don't know if you know this. It's a dumb example, but did you know the New York City Police Department had a cop that turned out to be a cannibal? All right, so so they get
Right.
pretty get pretty bad out
Well,
there.
they slip through the cracks.
But you've never met a cannibal on the job.
No,
have you?
not that I know of. Not that I know of. No.
But I agree. And even all the vile things cops are accused of, and I don't think I'm naive in this regard. I have not seen that. I have not witnessed that. And if any failing that cops do, often it is being overwhelmed, unable to manage a super difficult spot. Sometimes it's being there, you haven't slept enough.
Right.
Or a lot of things. So it's yeah, I agree with you on that.
So yeah, I think overall they're good people. They get into this job for a good reason and a noble reason, and some go wrong, and sometimes that happens. We're humans, so.
Mm-hmm. So before I wrap up, let me ask you: was there anything you thought I was going to ask you about that I didn't?
No, you touched on the book. I figured that was going to come up. Thought for sure I brought up, I guess, how much I started out making, but I get asked that question all the time.
Yeah.
Just because it's a funny story now, $3.75 an hour. People
Yeah.
can't even imagine that.
I made $3.33
Yeah.
on the ambulance, but
So
we had all the free dentures we wanted. I don't know if that counted.
right.
Dumb ambulance joke, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I didn't know really what you were going to say. Like I said, I listened to a couple of the podcasts just to
Okay.
kind of see if I could get the feel for what I was going to get into here. But I've
right.
never done anything like this, so.
Great. Well, I'm glad we did that for you and
Yeah.
your sons to document this and the work you did day in and day out. Any you want to call out for anybody that's been helpful in your life? Or?
Oh my gosh. Everybody across the board that I've worked with has helped me in one way or another. I mean, there's guys that make me look good every day, on calls, and junior officers and other officers. We have the most incredible training staff right now, at the training unit. They both firearms and RRA guys. It's never been better.
Yeah.
And I was part of that group for a lot of years early on, and we weren't doing anything like these guys are doing. They're so far above what we used to teach our cops, and I just think they're second to none.
Good.
And they make me look good. So.
Sure. Well, that's true. I hear that a lot. That's my observation as well.
Yeah.
We got a lot of good people.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. And we got a good city, but it's suffering, boy.
Yeah. And I know a lot of guys, you hear younger guys that, I've worked other departments, and grass isn't always greener on the other side. And we have people in our administration, chief, assistant chief, or I feel they're doing the best they can for this department. I really do. And maybe everybody doesn't agree with that, but that's my opinion. They're doing what they can for us, and they're in a time where there isn't a lot of support above them.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Yeah, that's got to be a real lonely job.
yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, that's a tough one. All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time to do this.
Thank you.
Just thanks to the listeners for listening to this, and like I say, get back to work.
All right, thank you.